In the small village of Marwa, nestled deep within the savannas of Africa, a boy named Kofi lived with his grandmother in a modest mud brick house. Kofi was a quiet and kind-hearted boy, known for his intelligence and respectfulness, but his life was anything but easy. His parents had passed away when he was just a toddler, leaving him to be raised by his grandmother, who loved him dearly despite their meager means. Kofi attended the local school, which was a thatched roof building with dirt floors. The children there were from different backgrounds, but the disparity in wealth was evident. Some children, like Kofi, wore patched-up clothes and carried their few school supplies in old bags. Others, like the son of the village chief, Kwame, wore new clothes every day, carried shiny new books, and never missed an opportunity to flaunt their wealth. Kwame, the rich kid, was the epitome of arrogance. He was used to getting whatever he wanted and had little regard for those who were less fortunate. From the first day Kofi set foot in the school, Kwame made it his mission to make Kofi's life miserable. He would tease him for his worn-out clothes, mock him for not having enough money to buy lunch, and spread rumors about him that weren't true. The other children, eager to gain Kwame's favor, often joined in the bullying, leaving Kofi isolated and friendless. But Kofi's grandmother had always taught him to endure hardships with grace and never to let the cruelty of others make him bitter. She would tell him stories of great ancestors who had faced unimaginable trials but had emerged stronger and wiser. These stories gave Kofi strength, and he tried to focus on his studies, hoping that one day education would lift him out of poverty. The mockery grows. One day, as Kofi sat under a large baobab tree during lunch, eating the simple meal his grandmother had prepared, just a piece of yam and some greens, Kwame and his gang approached him. Kwame looked at Kofi's meal with disgust and sneered. "Is that all you can afford to eat? No wonder you're so skinny. Why don't you ask your grandmother to buy you some real food? Oh wait, I forgot, you're poor." The other boys laughed loudly, and Kofi felt his cheeks burn with shame. He looked down at his food, trying to ignore them, but Kwame wasn't finished. "You know what?" Kwame said, his voice dripping with malice. "I think we should help Kofi learn what it's like to live like a king. Maybe if he experiences luxury, he'll stop being so pathetic." With that, Kwame grabbed Kofi's food and threw it on the ground. The other boys kicked dirt over it, laughing as they did so. Kofi's heart ached, not just from the loss of his meal, but from the cruelty of his classmates. He clenched his fists, feeling a mix of anger and sadness, but he didn't retaliate. Instead, he quietly stood up, brushed off the dirt from his clothes, and walked away, leaving the boys to their laughter. That night, as Kofi sat by the fire in his grandmother's hut, he couldn't hold back his tears any longer. His grandmother noticed his sorrow and asked him what had happened. When Kofi told her about the incident, she held him close and whispered, "My dear Kofi, the world is full of people who will try to bring you down. But remember, you are stronger than you know. The wealth of the heart is far greater than the wealth of the hand. One day, those who mock you will see the truth." Kofi nodded, wiping his tears, but he still felt the weight of the day's events pressing on his heart. The mysterious visitor. The next morning, as Kofi was walking to school, he noticed an old man sitting by the side of the road. The man was dressed in simple clothes, but there was something regal about his demeanor. His eyes, though old, sparkled with a wisdom that intrigued Kofi. As Kofi approached, the old man smiled and beckoned him closer. "Good morning, young man," the old man said, in a voice that was both gentle and commanding. "What brings such a heavy burden to your heart?" Kofi was surprised by the question, but felt compelled to answer. "It's nothing, sir," he replied, though his voice betrayed his sadness. The old man chuckled softly. "Nothing, you say? Yet your shoulders are slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. Come, sit with me for a moment. Perhaps I can lighten your load." Kofi hesitated, but then sat down beside the man. There was something comforting about his presence. The old man reached into a small pouch at his side and pulled out a handful of seeds. He handed them to Kofi and said, "Plant these in your heart, and they will grow into something extraordinary." Kofi looked at the seeds, confused. "But how can I plant these in my heart?" he asked. The old man smiled. "These are not ordinary seeds, Kofi. They are seeds of strength, courage, and wisdom. Whenever you feel the sting of cruelty or the weight of despair, close your eyes and remember these seeds. Let them take root in your heart, and you will find that no challenge is too great for you to overcome." Before Kofi could ask more, the old man stood up and began to walk away. "Wait!" Kofi called after him. "Who are you?" The old man turned around and smiled one last time. "I am but a humble traveler, Kofi, but remember this. Even the smallest seed can grow into the mightiest tree if it is nurtured with care." With that, the old man disappeared into the distance, leaving Kofi standing there with the seeds in his hand. Kofi didn't understand fully what had just happened, but he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He carefully put the seeds in his pocket and continued on his way to school, his heart feeling a little lighter. A new resolve. When Kofi arrived at school, Kwame and his gang were waiting for him, ready to continue their torment. But this time, Kofi felt different. He remembered the old man's words and imagined the seeds in his heart beginning to grow. As Kwame started his usual taunts, Kofi looked him straight in the eye, unflinching. "Is that the best you can do, Kwame?" Kofi said calmly, surprising everyone, including himself. Kwame was taken aback. He was used to Kofi cowering or walking away, not standing up to him. "What did you say?" Kwame snarled, stepping closer, trying to intimidate Kofi. "I said, is that the best you can do?" Kofi repeated, his voice steady. "Because if all you have to offer are empty words and cruelty, then you're not as strong as you think you are." The other boys looked at each other, unsure of how to react. This was not the Kofi they were used to. Kwame, not wanting to lose face, pushed Kofi, but Kofi stood his ground. The push wasn't strong enough to knock him down, but it was enough to show Kwame that Kofi wasn't afraid anymore. Kwame's face twisted with anger, but before he could do anything else, the school bell rang, signaling the start of the day. The boys reluctantly followed Kwame into the classroom, but Kofi noticed that the usual sneers and whispers were absent. Instead, there was a sense of confusion among them, as if they didn't know how to deal with this new Kofi. As the day went on, Kofi felt a strange energy within him. It was as if the seeds the old man had given him were indeed growing, filling him with a strength he hadn't known before. He paid attention in class, answered questions with confidence, and ignored the few remaining snide comments from Kwame and his gang. When school was over, Kofi walked home, his head held high. He knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had the strength to face whatever came his way. As he neared his village, he saw the old man again, standing by the side of the road, watching him with a knowing smile. Kofi smiled back, realizing that the old man was no ordinary traveler. He was a guide, sent to help Kofi discover the strength that had always been within him. The gift of the ancestors. That night, Kofi sat by the fire with his grandmother, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He told her about the old man and the seeds, and she listened intently, nodding as if she understood something profound. "My dear Kofi," she said after he finished, "the old man was a messenger from the ancestors. They have seen your struggles and have given you the gift of resilience. The seeds he gave you are a symbol of the strength that runs through your veins, the strength of our people." Kofi looked at his grandmother, his heart swelling with pride. He realized that he was not alone in this world. The spirits of his ancestors were watching over him, guiding him, and giving him the courage to face his challenges. As he lay down to sleep that night, Kofi felt the seeds of strength, courage, and wisdom growing within him. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. He would no longer be the boy who was bullied for being poor. He would be the boy who rose above his circumstances, the boy who became a man of great wisdom and strength. And so Kofi's journey began, a journey that would take him beyond the boundaries of his village, into the heart of the savannah, and into the depths of his own soul. A journey that would change him forever. Kofi awoke the next day with a sense of determination that hadn't been there before. The memory of the old man and the seeds still lingered in his mind, filling him with an unshakable resolve. The air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of morning dew and the distant sounds of birds beginning their day. As he walked to school, he noticed how the world around him seemed more vibrant. The colors of the wildflowers along the path were more vivid. The leaves on the trees rustled with a soft, comforting sound, and the sky above seemed endless. There was a new energy in the air, and Kofi felt it flowing through him. Upon reaching the schoolyard, he found Kwame and his group gathered as usual. They eyed Kofi with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The previous day's events had unsettled them. Kofi approached them without hesitation, his stride confident and sure. He didn't flinch when he met Kwame's gaze, and for the first time, Kwame looked away first. The school day passed in a blur. Kofi focused on his lessons, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. The seeds planted by the old man were growing, not just in his heart, but in his mind as well. He found himself understanding complex ideas more easily, and his teachers began to notice his quick intellect. But it wasn't just the teachers. Some of the other students started to see him differently too. A few even began to whisper that Kofi had changed, that there was something different about him. As the sun dipped low in the sky, signaling the end of the day, Kofi made his way home. But this time, he didn't follow his usual route. Something inside him urged him to take a different path, one that led away from the village and toward the dense forest that bordered it. The path was narrow, winding through thick trees and tall grass. The forest was a place of mystery where children were warned not to venture alone. But Kofi felt no fear. Instead, he felt a strange pull, as if the forest itself was calling him. He stepped into the shadowy embrace of the trees, and the sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of animals. The deeper he went, the more the world outside seemed to disappear. The air grew cooler, and the light dimmed as the canopy above thickened. After what seemed like hours, Kofi found himself in a small clearing. In the center stood a massive baobab tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, its roots spreading out like the fingers of an ancient hand. The tree was unlike any he had ever seen, its presence both awe-inspiring and comforting. Kofi approached it, feeling a deep connection to the ancient tree. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand on the rough bark. The moment his skin touched the tree, he felt a surge of energy, a warmth that spread from his hand to his entire body. The tree seemed to hum with life, and Kofi felt as though it was speaking to him. Not in words, but in a language of the heart, a language he instinctively understood. Images flashed in his mind, visions of the past, of people who had come before him. He saw a young warrior standing beneath the same tree, preparing for a great battle. He saw a wise elder, teaching children the secrets of the land. He saw mothers, fathers, hunters, and healers, all connected by the tree, by the land, by the spirit that flowed through them all. Kofi realized that the baobab tree was a guardian of memories, a keeper of the wisdom of his ancestors. The seeds the old man had given him were not just for strength, courage, and wisdom. They were a connection to this ancient source of knowledge. As the visions faded, Kofi felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. The tree had shown him that he was not just an ordinary boy, but a part of something much larger, something timeless. He was a link in the chain of his people, a bearer of their wisdom, strength, and spirit. When Kofi finally left the clearing, the forest seemed to part for him, guiding him back to the village. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the land. As he emerged from the forest, he felt renewed, as if he had been reborn. The villagers noticed a change in Kofi, though they couldn't quite put their finger on what it was. His steps were lighter, his eyes brighter, and there was a calm confidence about him that hadn't been there before. But it wasn't just his demeanor that had changed. Kofi had begun to understand the deeper connections between the land, the people, and the spirits that guided them. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but he was no longer afraid. The winds had whispered secrets to him, the forest had revealed its mysteries, and the baobab tree had rooted him in the strength of his ancestors. With these gifts, Kofi felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. Kofi's steps were quiet as he made his way through the village, the sounds of daily life filling the air around him. Women were pounding maize, children played by the river, and the elders sat in the shade, sharing stories of the past. Yet, beneath the surface of these everyday activities, Kofi could feel a subtle change, as if the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Kofi's grandmother called him to sit by the fire. The flames danced in the night, sending flickers of light across her weathered face. She began to tell a story, one that Kofi had heard many times before, but this time it felt different. In the time of our ancestors, she began, her voice low and melodic, there was a great chief who ruled over these lands. He was wise and just, beloved by his people, but he had no sons to inherit his wisdom. Fearing that his knowledge would be lost, he called upon the spirits of the land to guide him. They told him to plant a special tree in the center of the village, a tree that would hold the memories and wisdom of the people. Kofi listened intently, the image of the baobab tree he had touched in the forest vivid in his mind. His grandmother's words seemed to carry new weight, resonating with the visions he had seen. Each year, she continued, the chief would gather the people around the tree, and they would drum and sing, sharing their stories and wisdom with the tree, so that it would grow strong and mighty, and so that their knowledge would never be lost. As his grandmother spoke, Kofi felt the pull of the past, the echoes of the drums, the voices of his ancestors blending with the crackling of the fire. The stories were not just tales, they were living memories, woven into the fabric of the land, the people, and the trees that surrounded them. That night, Kofi couldn't sleep. The drums of the ancestors seemed to call out to him, their rhythm pulsing in his veins. He knew he needed to return to the baobab tree in the forest. There was something there, something he needed to understand. Slipping out of his hut, Kofi made his way back to the forest. The night was still, the sky a blanket of stars above. The path to the clearing was easier to find this time, as if the forest itself remembered his steps. When he reached the baobab tree, the moonlight bathed it in a soft glow, making it appear even more ancient and wise. Kofi sat beneath the tree, closing his eyes and listening to the silence around him. But as he sat there, the silence began to fill with sounds, faint at first, like whispers on the wind, but gradually growing louder. It was the sound of drums, deep and resonant, echoing through the forest. The rhythm was familiar, the same rhythm his grandmother had spoken of in her story. The drums called to him, urging him to listen, to understand. As the sound enveloped him, Kofi felt a presence beside him. Opening his eyes, he saw the old man from before, standing by the tree, his face serene and knowing. "The drums are the heartbeat of our people," the old man said, his voice blending with the rhythm of the drums. "They carry the wisdom of the past, the strength of the present, and the hope of the future. Listen to them, Kofi, and you will hear the voices of your ancestors." Kofi listened, the sound of the drums filling him, resonating with something deep within his soul. The old man placed a hand on the tree and began to chant, a low, rhythmic chant that matched the beat of the drums. Kofi found himself joining in, the words coming to him as if they had always been there, waiting to be spoken. As they chanted, the tree seemed to come alive. The leaves rustled, the branches swayed, and the air around them shimmered with energy. The visions returned, this time more vivid and intense. Kofi saw the great chief standing tall and proud, his people gathered around the tree, their faces lit with the light of the fire. He saw the warriors preparing for battle, the healers tending to the wounded, the children learning the stories of their ancestors. And then he saw something new, a vision of himself, standing beneath the baobab tree, surrounded by the people of his village. The drums were loud, their rhythm strong, and Kofi was leading them, his voice clear and powerful. He was not just a boy, he was a leader, a keeper of the wisdom of his people. The vision faded, but the feeling remained. Kofi understood now. The baobab tree, the drums, the stories, they were all connected, all part of the same tapestry that bound his people together. He had a role to play in this, a responsibility to uphold the traditions, to keep the wisdom alive. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Kofi rose to his feet. The old man was gone, but the drums still echoed in his ears. He knew what he needed to do. The time had come to share what he had learned, to bring the village together around the tree, to let the drums of the ancestors guide them. Kofi left the forest, his heart steady, his purpose clear. The day was beginning, but Kofi felt that something much greater was also beginning, something that would shape the future of his village, something that had been waiting for this moment, for this boy, for this time. The village of Mawa stirred with the first signs of dawn, the cool air filled with the scents of earth and wood smoke. The villagers began their daily routines, unaware that today would be unlike any other. Kofi, with the memory of the baobab tree and the rhythm of the drum still pulsing within him, knew it was time to act. The vision had shown him what needed to be done, and he felt a deep, unwavering resolve. As the sun climbed higher, Kofi went from house to house, speaking quietly with the elders, the women, and the young men of the village. He told them of the old man's visit, the sacred tree in the forest, and the vision he had experienced. His words were filled with a quiet authority that surprised even him, and the villagers listened intently, sensing the importance of what he was saying. The elders, who had long feared that the old ways were being forgotten, nodded in agreement. They recognized the truth in Kofi's words and the urgency in his voice. One by one, they pledged their support, agreeing to gather the people at the baobab tree at dusk. The day passed slowly, filled with anticipation. Kofi felt a mixture of excitement and calm, knowing that this was a moment of great significance. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, the people of Marwa made their way to the edge of the forest. They walked in silence, the only sound the soft crunch of their feet on the dry earth. When they reached the clearing, the sight that greeted them took their breath away. The baobab tree stood tall and majestic, its ancient branches spreading wide as if embracing the sky. The last rays of the setting sun bathed the tree in a golden light, making it glow with a warmth that felt both otherworldly and familiar. The villagers gathered around the tree, forming a wide circle. The elders stood at the front, their faces lined with wisdom and expectation. The children clung to their mothers, their eyes wide with wonder, and in the center of it all stood Kofi, his heart steady, his voice strong. He raised his hands, and a hush fell over the crowd. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence deep and profound. Then from somewhere deep within the forest, the sound of drums began to echo, just as it had in Kofi's vision. The rhythm was slow at first, a gentle pulse that matched the beating of the heart. But gradually it grew louder, stronger, until it filled the clearing with its powerful, resonant sound. Kofi began to speak, his voice carrying over the sound of the drums. He told the story of the baobab tree, of the wisdom it held, and of the spirits that watched over their people. He spoke of the old man and the gift of the seeds, and how the tree was a connection to the ancestors, a bridge between the past and the present. As he spoke, the villagers began to feel a stirring within them, a sense of connection to something much larger than themselves. The drums continued, their rhythm growing more complex, weaving through the air like a living thing. The people swayed to the beat, their bodies moving in time with the music, their spirits lifting as they became one with the rhythm. Then, Kofi did something that no one expected. He began to chant, just as the old man had done in the vision. The words flowed from him effortlessly, ancient words that he had never learned but somehow knew. The chant rose and fell, weaving through the beat of the drums, carrying with it the power of the ancestors. As Kofi chanted, the baobab tree began to respond. The branches swayed, the leaves rustled, and a warm breeze swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of earth and life. The villagers felt the presence of the spirits, their ancestors surrounding them, embracing them. It was as if the tree itself was alive, breathing in time with the drums, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the sky. The elders stepped forward, their voices joining Kofi's in the chant. The women followed, their voices rising high and clear, a song of life and memory. The children clapped their hands and stamped their feet, their laughter mingling with the music. The men added their voices, deep and strong, grounding the chant with their strength. The chant and the drums built to a crescendo, filling the clearing with sound, with life, with power. The baobab tree stood at the center of it all, a beacon of strength and wisdom, its ancient roots holding the memories of generations. The villagers felt a deep sense of unity, a connection to their past and their future, all bound together by the rhythm of the drums, the chant of the ancestors, and the presence of the sacred tree. As the final notes of the chant faded into the night, the drums slowed, their beat softening until it was just a whisper on the wind. The villagers stood in silence, their hearts full, their spirits lifted. The connection to their ancestors, to the land, and to each other was stronger than ever before. Kofi looked around at the faces of his people, seeing the change in their eyes, the light that had been rekindled. He knew that they had all felt it, the presence of the ancestors, the power of the baobab tree, the strength of their unity. This night would be remembered for generations, a night when the people of Marwa came together to honor their past, to embrace their present, and to step confidently into their future. The village of Marwa awoke to a day unlike any other. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and a sense of renewed purpose flowed through the people. They went about their tasks with a quiet energy, still feeling the echoes of the previous night's gathering. The baobab tree had become a symbol of unity and strength, and the villagers felt its presence even from afar. Kofi moved through the village, his mind focused on the tasks ahead. The elders had called for a meeting in the evening, and preparations were underway. The villagers were busy gathering food, setting up spaces for the gathering, and preparing to honor the ancestors once more. But there was something else, something unspoken in the air, a sense that the night would bring new challenges, new revelations. As the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the landscape, the villagers started to assemble. The baobab tree, now a place of sacred gathering, stood tall and silent, awaiting the night's events. Kofi could feel the tension in the air, a subtle vibration that hummed just beneath the surface. It was as if the tree itself was aware of what was to come. The elders arrived first, their faces solemn and thoughtful. They gathered around the tree, their presence commanding respect and attention. The women followed, bringing with them the fruits of their labor, baskets of yams, fresh fish, and pots of stew, their scents mingling in the cool evening air. The children, sensing the gravity of the occasion, sat quietly near their mothers, their eyes wide with anticipation. Kofi took his place beside the elders, feeling the weight of their gaze upon him. He knew that they looked to him not just as a boy, but as a bridge between the old ways and the new, a guide who had been touched by the spirits of the ancestors. The night before had been just the beginning. Now they needed to delve deeper, to seek out the wisdom that the tree held. As the last light of day faded, the villagers lit torches, their flames flickering in the gathering darkness. The sky above was clear, the stars beginning to show themselves one by one. But the moon was absent, hidden away on this night of the new moon, leaving the world in the hands of the stars and the firelight. The eldest of the elders, a woman named Nana Ya, stepped forward, her voice, though soft, carried across the clearing, demanding attention. Tonight, we gather not just to honor the past, but to look to the future. The spirits have spoken, and they have chosen Kofi to lead us in this time of change. The villagers murmured in agreement, their eyes turning to Kofi. He felt a mix of pride and responsibility, knowing that the time had come to fulfill the role the ancestors had placed upon him. He stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the gathering. "We stand at a crossroads," Kofi began, his words clear and deliberate. "The baobab tree has shown us the power of our ancestors, the strength of our unity. But it has also shown us that we must face what lies ahead with wisdom and courage. The spirits have guided us this far, and now it is time for us to take the next step." Nana Ya nodded, her eyes shining with approval. She gestured to the villagers, and they began to form a circle around the tree, each holding a piece of the earth, a rock, a branch, a handful of soil. The children were given small bundles of herbs, their scents sharp and cleansing. The elders, each carrying a carved staff, took their places at the 4 cardinal points, their faces lit by the torchlight. Kofi moved to the base of the baobab tree, placing his hand on its rough bark. He could feel the power within it, the deep roots that connected it to the land, to the spirits, to everything that was and ever would be. He closed his eyes, allowing the tree's energy to flow through him, guiding him to the words that needed to be spoken. "The ancestors are with us," Kofi said, his voice strong. "They have given us their wisdom, their strength, but they have also given us a challenge. We must protect this land, this village, and each other. We must honor the past, but we must also create a future that our children and their children can be proud of." As he spoke, the wind began to stir, rustling the leaves of the baobab tree, carrying with it the scents of the herbs and the earth. The villagers tightened their circle, their faces serious, their hearts ready. Nana Ya raised her staff, signaling the beginning of the ritual. The elders began to chant, their voices low and rhythmic, a sound that seemed to rise from the very earth beneath them. The villagers joined in, their voices blending into a single, powerful chorus. Kofi felt the energy of the chant rise within him, filling him with a sense of purpose. He reached into the pocket of his tunic and pulled out the seeds the old man had given him, holding them up for all to see. "These seeds," he said, his voice ringing out over the chant, "are a gift from the ancestors. They are not just for me, they are for all of us. They represent the strength and wisdom that we carry within us, the power to grow and thrive even in the harshest of conditions." He knelt at the base of the tree, digging a small hole in the earth with his hands. Carefully, he placed the seeds into the hole, covering them with soil and pressing it down firmly. As he did so, the wind picked up, swirling around the clearing, lifting the flames of the torches higher, making them dance wildly. The chant grew louder, more insistent, as if the very spirits were speaking through the voices of the villagers. Kofi stood, his heart pounding, feeling the energy of the earth beneath him, the power of the tree beside him, and the strength of his people all around him. He knew that this moment was a turning point, a time when the past and the future met, where the spirit of the land, the wisdom of the ancestors, and the hopes of the people came together as one. The chanting reached a crescendo, and then, all at once, it stopped. The clearing fell into silence, the only sound the soft rustling of the leaves and the crackling of the torches. Nana Ya stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "The seeds have been planted," she said, her eyes meeting Kofi's. "Now we must water them with our care, nurture them with our wisdom, and protect them with our strength. We are the guardians of this land, the keepers of the past, and the makers of the future." The villagers stood in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. They understood the responsibility that had been placed upon them, the duty they had to each other, to the land, and to the spirits that guided them. Kofi felt the connection between them all, a web of life and energy that bound them together, stronger than any single person, deeper than any single moment. He knew that they would face challenges ahead, but with the strength of the ancestors, the wisdom of the elders, and the unity of the people, they would overcome them. The night was dark, the moon hidden, but the light of the torches, the warmth of the fire, and the spirit of the baobab tree illuminated the way forward. In the days that followed the gathering, a stillness settled over Marwa, a quiet before the coming storm. The villagers, though resolute, sensed that something more was on the horizon, an unseen force testing their newfound strength. The baobab tree stood as a sentinel, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the heavens as if holding the village in a protective embrace. Kofi awoke early one morning, the air unusually heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. His grandmother was already awake, sitting by the fire, her eyes distant, focused on something far beyond the walls of their humble home. She had seen many seasons, and her instincts were sharp. She knew the signs when the spirits were restless. "Kofi," she called softly, her voice carrying a weight that made him pause. "The time has come to prove that we are worthy of the gifts the ancestors have given us." Kofi nodded, understanding that she meant more than just the physical seeds planted beneath the baobab tree. The test ahead would require them to draw upon every lesson, every story, and every ounce of strength passed down through generations. Word quickly spread through the village that something was amiss. The animals were restless, the winds had shifted, and the skies, though clear, held an ominous energy. The elders gathered once more beneath the baobab tree, their faces etched with concern. The villagers assembled, drawn together by the invisible thread of shared destiny. Nana Ya, the elder who had guided them through the planting of the seeds, stepped forward, her staff striking the ground with a deliberate rhythm. "The spirits have given us their blessing," she began, her voice strong, "but they also demand that we prove our worth. There is a trial before us, one that we must face together. The land will test us, the spirits will test us, and we must not falter." Kofi felt a chill run down his spine. He could feel the weight of the eyes upon him, the expectations, the hopes, and the fears of his people. The connection he had felt with the baobab tree, the spirits and his ancestors, was stronger than ever, but now it was being put to the test. As the sun climbed higher, the elders began to prepare. They instructed the villagers to gather the strongest warriors, the most skilled hunters, and those with the deepest knowledge of the land. The women prepared healing herbs, while the children were taught songs of courage, songs that would carry the spirit of their people through whatever lay ahead. The sky began to darken, not with clouds, but with an eerie shifting shadow that moved across the horizon. The air grew colder, and the winds picked up, swirling around the village in unpredictable patterns. The animals, sensing the change, grew silent, their usual calls and movements stilled by an unseen force. Kofi stood at the edge of the gathering, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He could feel the energy building, a storm not of rain and wind, but of spirit and power. The baobab tree swayed gently, its leaves rustling in a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the land. Nana Ya began to chant, her voice rising above the sound of the wind. The other elders joined in, their voices weaving together in a powerful melody that resonated deep within the earth. The villagers followed, their voices adding to the chorus, creating a wall of sound that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. Then, from the shadows, figures began to emerge, shapes that shifted and moved, not entirely solid, but more than mere illusions. They were spirits, ancestors who had come to test the resolve of the living. They moved with a fluid grace, their forms both beautiful and terrifying, their eyes glowing with an ancient light. The warriors stepped forward, weapons at the ready, but Nana Ya raised her hand, signaling them to hold. "This is not a battle of weapons," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is a test of spirit, of heart, of unity." Kofi understood. The spirits were not there to harm but to challenge, to see if the village could stand as one, if the strength of their ancestors truly lived within them. He moved to the front of the gathering, feeling the eyes of the spirits upon him. Their gaze was heavy with the weight of centuries, but Kofi did not waver. He began to chant, his voice clear and unwavering, the words flowing from him as naturally as breath. The villagers joined in, their voices rising together in a powerful wave of sound and spirit. The spirits responded, their forms becoming more defined, their movements more purposeful. It was as if they were being drawn to the energy of the chant, compelled to listen, to judge. The wind howled, the earth trembled, but the villagers held their ground, their voices never faltering. The baobab tree stood tall, its roots deep in the earth, its branches outstretched, as if offering its strength to the people. The spirits drew closer, their forms towering over the villagers, their eyes glowing with the light of the ancient stars. They moved in a circle around the baobab tree, their presence commanding and immense. But the villagers did not break. Their chant grew louder, their unity stronger, their spirit unyielding. Kofi could feel the energy of the spirits, their power immense, but he also felt something else, a recognition, a respect. The spirits were not just testing them, they were looking for something, searching for a sign that the people of Marwa were truly connected to the land, to the ancestors, to each other. The storm of energy reached its peak, a swirling vortex of wind, sound and light that engulfed the village. The spirits loomed large, their forms nearly indistinguishable from the darkness around them, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm ceased. The wind died down, the earth grew still, and the spirits faded back into the shadows, their forms dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The sky cleared, the sun breaking through with a warm golden light that bathed the village in its glow. The villagers stood in silence, the chant fading into the stillness of the morning. Kofi lowered his head, feeling the weight of the moment lift, replaced by a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. The spirits had tested them, and they had proven their worth. Nana Ya stepped forward, placing a hand on Kofi's shoulder. Her touch was light, but it carried with it the strength of all those who had come before. "The ancestors have seen your heart, Kofi. They have seen the heart of our people. We are one with the land, one with the spirits, one with each other." The villagers began to smile, their tension melting away. The test had been passed, and with it, the bond between the living and the spirits had been solidified. The baobab tree stood as a testament to their unity, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the heavens, a bridge between worlds. Kofi looked around at his people, seeing the strength in their eyes, the light in their faces. The spirits had tested them, but it was the spirit of the village, the spirit of the land that had prevailed. The sky was clear, the air warm, and the village of Marwa stood strong, united by the wisdom of the past, the strength of the present, and the hope of the future. The days following the trial were filled with a sense of calm, as if the very earth had settled into a deep and contented slumber. The villagers of Marwa went about their lives with a renewed vigor, each task carried out with the knowledge that they had proven themselves worthy in the eyes of the spirits. The baobab tree, now revered more than ever, had become a place of daily pilgrimage, where the people came to offer their thanks and seek guidance. One afternoon, as the sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long golden shadows, Kofi found himself drawn once more to the clearing where the baobab tree stood. The air was still, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. As he approached the tree, he noticed a familiar figure sitting quietly at its base. The old man who had first given Kofi the seeds was back, his presence as serene and enigmatic as before. He sat with his back against the tree, his eyes closed, a faint smile playing on his lips as if he were listening to a song only he could hear. Kofi approached him with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. The old man opened his eyes slowly, the deep wisdom within them unchanged. He motioned for Kofi to sit beside him, and Kofi obeyed, feeling the warmth of the earth beneath him, the solid presence of the tree at his back. "You have done well," the old man said, his voice a soft murmur barely louder than the wind. "The spirits are pleased, and the bond between your people and the land is strong." Kofi nodded, feeling the truth of the old man's words. But there was something else, a question that had been forming in his mind ever since the spirits had tested them. "Why did they test us?" Kofi asked, his voice quiet but steady. "What is it that they seek from us?" The old man looked at Kofi, his eyes narrowing slightly as if considering the weight of the question. "The spirits do not seek to harm or to challenge without cause," he replied slowly. "They test those they believe have the potential to protect the balance of the world. The land, the people, the spirits, all are connected, and that connection must be guarded." Kofi listened intently, his heart beating a little faster as the old man continued. "The seeds I gave you were not just a gift, they were a responsibility. The strength, wisdom, and courage you have cultivated within yourself and within your village are not just for your benefit. They are the tools you will need to protect this balance." A sense of understanding began to dawn on Kofi. The events of the past weeks, the gathering, the trial, everything had been leading to this moment. The old man had known all along that Kofi and his people would be called upon to protect something far greater than themselves. "The spirits have granted you their blessing," the old man said, his voice growing firmer. "But with that blessing comes a duty. You must remain vigilant, Kofi. The land is alive, the spirits are watching, and there are forces beyond this village that seek to disrupt the harmony that you have fought to maintain." Kofi felt a shiver run through him, not of fear, but of determination. He understood now that his role and the role of his village was far from over. They had been chosen not just to receive the wisdom of the ancestors, but to act as guardians of that wisdom, protectors of the land and the balance it represented. The old man stood, his movement slow and deliberate, as if each action held meaning beyond what was visible. He looked down at Kofi, his expression both stern and kind. "You are ready, Kofi. But remember, you are not alone. The spirits are with you, the land is with you, and your people are with you. Together you will face whatever comes." With those final words, the old man turned and began to walk away, his figure gradually blending into the landscape until he was no more than a shadow against the setting sun. Kofi watched him go, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions. The old man had given him much to think about, but there was no doubt in his heart that he was prepared for whatever lay ahead. The village of Marwa had faced its first test and emerged stronger, and now it was up to them to protect the balance they had fought so hard to uphold. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of orange and red, Kofi rose to his feet. The baobab tree stood tall behind him, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching out as if embracing the sky. Kofi placed his hand on the tree, feeling the strength and wisdom that flowed through it. A reminder of the connection he shared with his ancestors and the spirits. He knew that the path forward would not be easy, but with the knowledge that the spirits were with him and the unity of his people behind him, Kofi felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The balance of the world rested in their hands, and they would protect it with all the strength and courage they possessed. The days grew longer, and the village of Marwa flourished under the watchful gaze of the baobab tree. The seeds planted by Kofi had begun to sprout, small but sturdy shoots breaking through the soil, a testament to the resilience of the land and its people. The villagers tended to these young plants with care, knowing they represented more than just life. They were symbols of their bond with the spirits and the earth. But even as the village thrived, there was a sense of anticipation, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The old man's words echoed in Kofi's mind, about the balance that needed to be protected, about forces that might seek to disrupt it. Kofi could feel the weight of his responsibility, but he also knew he was not alone. The spirits, the land, and his people were with him. One evening, as the sky was painted with the vibrant colors of the setting sun, a distant sound reached the village. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder, more distinct. The sound of drums, deep, rhythmic, and insistent, echoed across the plains, filling the air with a sense of urgency. The villagers gathered quickly, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Kofi stood among them, listening intently to the rhythm of the drums. These were not the drums of celebration or ritual. There was something different about them, something that spoke of warning. Nana Ya, ever the wise elder, stepped forward. Her eyes were narrowed, her expression serious. "These drums are not from our village," she said, her voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. "They come from the hills, from the lands beyond our own. We must be cautious." The villagers exchanged worried glances. The hills were a place of mystery, a land where the spirits were said to be wild and unpredictable. Few dared to venture there, and those who did often returned with strange tales or not at all. Kofi felt a stirring within him, a call to action that he could not ignore. The balance was in danger. He could feel it as surely as he felt the earth beneath his feet. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, his voice steady. "I will go," he declared, "and see what these drums mean. If there is a threat, we must face it together." Nanaya looked at Kofi, her gaze penetrating, as if she was searching his soul. Finally, she nodded. "You will not go alone, Kofi. Take with you those who have proven their courage, those who understand the land and the spirits. This is not a task for one person, but for a united people." Kofi chose his companions carefully, warriors who had defended the village, hunters who knew the land, and elders who carried the wisdom of generations. Together, they prepared for the journey to the hills, their hearts steeled for whatever awaited them. As they left the village, the sky darkened, the sun sinking below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in twilight. The drums grew louder as they approached the hills, their rhythm more urgent, more demanding. The path was steep, winding through thick forests and rocky outcrops, but the group pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the balance of their world depended on them. When they reached the top of the hills, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A massive circle of fire burned in the center of the clearing, its flames reaching high into the sky. Around the fire, figures danced, their forms shadowy and indistinct, as if they were not entirely of this world. The drums pounded relentlessly, their beats synchronized with the flickering of the flames. At the heart of the circle stood a figure, taller than the others, draped in a cloak of darkness. Its presence was overwhelming, a force of nature that seemed to draw power from the very earth itself. Kofi knew instinctively that this was the source of the disturbance, the force that threatened the balance. The figure turned to face them, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You come to challenge me?" it asked, its voice deep and resonant, reverberating through the air. "You think you can protect the balance?" Kofi stepped forward, feeling the strength of his ancestors behind him, the wisdom of the elders in his heart, and the courage of his people in his soul. "We do not seek to challenge," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "We seek to protect what is sacred, the balance between the land, the spirits, and the people." The figure laughed, a sound like the crackling of fire and the rumble of distant thunder. "The balance is fragile," it said, its tone mocking. "It can be shattered with a single act, a single moment of weakness. Are you strong enough to prevent that?" Kofi did not waver. He knew that this was the final test, the ultimate challenge. The spirits had guided him to this moment, and now it was up to him and his people to prove that they were worthy of the gifts they had been given. The figure raised its hands and the flames surged higher, the drums beating faster, louder. The ground beneath them trembled, as if the earth itself was reacting to the power being unleashed. But Kofi did not move. He stood his ground, his heart steady, his resolve unshaken. "We are one with the land," Kofi declared, his voice rising above the chaos. "We are one with the spirits, and together we will protect the balance." The villagers who had accompanied him joined in, their voices forming a chorus of defiance and unity. The power of their words, their conviction, pushed back against the force of the figure, the flames flickering, the drums faltering. The figure hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. It had not expected such strength, such unity. Slowly, the flames began to die down, the drums losing their rhythm, until finally the fire was nothing more than embers, the drums silent. The figure lowered its hands, its form shrinking, becoming less imposing. "You have proven yourselves," it said, its voice softer now, almost respectful. "The balance is safe, for now." With those final words, the figure dissolved into the night, leaving only the faint glow of the dying fire and the distant echo of drums carried away on the wind. Kofi and his companions stood in silence, the weight of what they had just accomplished settling over them. They had faced the greatest challenge yet, and they had prevailed. Not through force, but through unity, wisdom, and the deep connection they shared with the land and the spirits. As they made their way back to the village, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, bathing the world in a soft golden glow. The balance had been preserved, and with it, the future of Marwa and its people. Kofi felt a sense of peace, a deep, abiding peace that came from knowing that the land, the spirits, and the people were in harmony. The baobab tree stood tall, its roots deep, its branches strong, a symbol of the unbreakable bond between the past, the present, and the future. And as the village of Marwa awoke to a new day, the people knew that they were not just survivors, but protectors, guardians of the balance, keepers of the ancient wisdom, and custodians of the land that had given them life. The spirits watched over them, the land nourished them, and together they faced whatever came, united as one.